The parsha, of course, is Vayeitseh. And this is where Yaakov leaves his father's house. He leaves Beersheba. Essentially, it's not just leaving his father's house. In the broader picture, it is leaving Kedusha, leaving Eretz Yisrael, and going out into Golus, and into a very deep Golus, and all by himself, in Choron. The Torah tells us various things that happened to him throughout this long journey. You probably know, or we'll find out in a couple of days, that he was in Choron actually 20 years. 20 years. And then it took him 2 more years to journey to travel back. The first thing that the Torah relates is this dream that he had. He stopped, as the Gemara tells us, he stopped in this place, which is the place of the Beis Hamikdash, and he slept over there. And he had this marvelous dream of this ladder standing deep in the ground and reaching all the way up to the deep heavens. And he sees Malachim going up and down. And Hashem is promising him that he is with him and so forth. And he also there says to him, the famous posuk that we Leactures and the whole world now know, that you will break through into the entire world. Now, we know what we learned before, that Yankee was a very modest person. Asa was going around conquering the world, grabbing other people's properties and so forth. Yankee minded his own business. Yankee Ishtom Yeshivei Holim. His big thing is that he sits in the tent and learns. Yankee, the last thing in his mind would be to conquer the world. He's not interested in conquering the world. He wants to sit and learn. And Hashem is giving him this bracha, and he says, and that is just at the time when he has this dream of the ladder standing from the ground going all the way up. How is this relate to Yankov's avodah, to Yankov's nature, to Yankov's way of life? We spoke many times pointing out the profound difference between the Jewish people and the function of the Jewish people in the world and all other peoples in the world, all other peoples. Although they also are required by Torah, Hashem requires that they live a decent life. Yet the function and the purpose of the Jewish people is totally different. And we know, if you follow through, you're first beginning the Chumash now, just to go through and see how the Jewish people, how their whole nationhood, so to speak, developed. It's totally different than any other nation. The Jewish people, as you will see, and I'm sure you know, acquired the Torah, their constitution, so to speak, before they had their land. Which means that they are defined in a totally different way. In principle, and we will see how this is reflected in today's parsha, a Yid is a true participant. Everybody knows what participant means? He's a partner. He's taking a part in the entire goings on of the world, in the existence of the world itself. It would seem superficially that every individual person in this world, he comes, he has his 120 years, and then the next generation comes. And everybody is like a sojourner. He takes a trip. He takes a trip across the world, and he experiences certain things, he enjoys certain things, he has some disappointments, and then the world goes on. The world goes on its own. And he is just kind of observing what's going on. That may be true regarding all other creatures in the world, including other nations. The Jewish people are entirely in different stance, in different position. They are actually participating, and they are causing the world to move on. They are the ones who are making the world in what it is. They're not observers. Not only do they affect their own lives, they are the basis of the entire existence. This is what it says in the Torah right in the beginning. It says, Bereshis, Bora Elokim Hashamayim v'ha'aretz. So it says that, Rashi says right away, Bereshis means Beis Reshis. There are two things in the world that are called Reshis. The Torah and Yisrael. And this is Bora Elokim Hashamayim. This is why Hashem created Shemayim v'ha'aretz. This is the essence. Yankov, up until that time, was sitting and learning. First he sat and learned in his own house. Then afterwards, as it says, I'm sure you learned, that when he had to run away from Esav, so he went to yeshiva, far away to yeshiva in Shem Ba'evar, and he hid there for 14 years. Sat and learned. Here now, he is going out from such a deep yeshiva environment, where he sat and learned round the clock, 24 hours a day. As it says, he never slept. He just dozed off for the moment just to catch himself back and go back to learn. That's what it says. And he's going out into Chora. The change environment is very dramatic. How is Yaakov going to relate to this new world? So the first thing that Hashem showed him is this ladder. And he said, this ladder stands on the ground, which means to the lowest level. Symbolizing, in effect, that Jewish activity, Jewish life, does not consist necessarily of high intellectual activity. It may be an activity that's entirely down to earth. But if it is done in a proper way, if it is done as a Yid does it, if it is done with the dedication to Hashem, then this simple activity has the effect of reaching up all the way to the heavens. We know in our own lives we do sit and learn and so forth, but much of our time and much of our activity is very repetitive. We get up in the morning, we watch Negelwasser, the same Negelwasser which we did yesterday and the day before and the day before that. We daven, we say the very same words that we davened yesterday. We put on tefillin. These are all very simple activities. One doesn't have to be a genius to be able to do all of these things. And one may kind of question and ask himself, what am I really accomplishing here? What am I doing? So here in this ladder, Hashem had illustrated to Yaakov and to us that what we do as, what Yaakov does, what we do as Jews, has an entirely different effect and power in the world than what meets the eye, than what it seems. You may be doing something extremely simple, but the effect is extremely profound. The difference between sitting and learning as an intellectual experience. You're developing your mind, you're becoming smarter, you know things, as opposed to doing a mitzvah. Now, learning is also a mitzvah. But if we talk in terms of learning, in terms of a person's personal development, doing a mitzvah is the meaning of being a participant in the world, in creating the world. Whereas learning, if it's, as I said, if it's not done as a mitzvah but done for personal development, then it is being an observant, being in an observation tower. What's going on? What is the world all about? Putting on tefillin is being part of the creation of the world, of bringing godly energy and godly blessing into the world. Yaakov as the Torah relates, went out and the first thing he did, he met up with these 3 shepherds. Who are the 3 shepherds? He doesn't know them. They are shepherds, completely strangers to him. And immediately he tells them, what are you doing? You're not supposed to be sitting over here. You're supposed to go and feed your sheep. You learn this, and Rashi explains what his discussion with them was. In other words, even though Yankee was now in a totally strange land, in Choron, and he was there just arriving, a total stranger, immediately it bothered him why there is something going on in the world that's not right. Because the whole world is his responsibility. But then we go further and we see Yankee begins to work for Lavan. We know from Chassidus that Yankov's engagement with Lavan was not just that he was working and getting paid. Yankov's engagement with Lavan was a way to break through the klipa, the lowliness of Lavan, and actually cause a transformation in Lavan. Until, as you will see, towards the end, Lavan had to concede that Yankov was right, which was a very big breakthrough. It says later on that Lavan recognized that he was blessed. He became wealthy. He became wealthy in disproportionate way because of Yankov's coming. So there's an interesting Gemara. The Gemara discusses what kind of blessing did Lavan get. It says, "Vayevorech Hashem Meisei." Hashem blessed me. What was? How do you measure that blessing? So there are 2 opinions in the Gemara. One opinion is that every day he had 100 sheep more than he expected. 100. Another opinion was that he had 1,000 more sheep. That's what the Gemara says. So this seems to be a very kind of a guesswork type of a discussion. 100 sheep, 1,000 sheep. What is it really about? What is this whole discussion about? So there's a sikh in the Rabbi explains this very, very profoundly. Yankov was here by Lavan, and his job, his function by Lavan, as mentioned before, was to have an effect on Lavan. This is why, in fact, Lavan was blessed. Because a blessing means that Yankov brought down Hashem's blessing on Lavan. This was his function, to transform and to affect Lavan. The question is, and this is what the discussion of the Gemara, what type of effect is Yankov going to have on Lavan? And it could be in one of two ways. It could be that he will have an effect on Lavan such that Lavan himself will reach his own extreme level of perfection. Like Lavan had his capabilities and had his blessings and so forth, but there were many things that he was short and he was not fully accomplishing, and Yankee would bring about that he would have full accomplishment. This would be sort of a saying that he would bring Lavan to do Shava Mitzvahs B'nai Noach to the utmost, to the best possible level. But then there is another one, that Yankee would affect Lavan a full transformation. A full transformation would mean that Lavan would actually recognize the truth that Yankiv represents. Not that Lavan has, but Yankiv's insights. And this is what the Gemara says, that Lavan found 1,000 sheep. What's 1,000? 1,000 is Elef. It was included as 1,000 is Elef. Elef has also the meaning of Pele. Pele means a wonder, a ness. In other words, this came to the point when Lavan began to recognize that this was not a natural phenomenon, this was not a natural blessing, but this was something beyond nature, a Pele. Which means that Yankee had the effect of completely changing over Lavan's world. And how did he do it? Did he perform miracles? He did it with quite a simple activity. He did it with honest work to the point where he recognized that everything he does is a question of Kiddush Hashem or Chil Hashem. Everything he does is representing his Dan L'Shem Shamayim. And just, even though he was basically watching over Lavan's sheep, by day and by night. As a matter of fact, the Gemara says that Yankee was concerned that he may forget the Torah that he learned. He didn't have a chance to learn. He was so busy day and night tending to the sheep that he didn't have a chance to learn. And he was concerned that he may forget to learn. That's why it says that during the time that Yankee was by Lavan, he was saying Tilim. The Gemara says that he was saying Tilim. What's the point of Tilim? Because it says that David HaMelech had asked Hashem that anyone who doesn't have a chance to learn, if he says Tilim, he should be considered that he learned the deepest inyanim in Torah. So Yankee, because he couldn't learn, so instead of learning, he was saying Tilim while he was tending the sheep. That's what the one day Gemara says.
Wasn't King David after the... Wasn't King David after Good question.
King David was definitely after Yankee. But everything, first of all, we know that they always knew the whole Torah, and then also much of the Tilim that David said was something that was given over from generation to generation, and he compiled it together into one book. Like you say, Mizmor Shili Hashavos, Tefillah David, this whole Tefillah Moshe, what we say in Shabbos, Tefillah Moshe, that Moshe Rabbeinu composed it. Okay.
We have some that Adam composed, some of the Psalms.
Excuse me?
Adam composed some of the
Yeah. So, the central theme of today's parsha is that here we have Yankiv, a profound scholar, and he was torn away from his scholarship, and he was doing completely menial work. Not only did he not complain, but on the contrary, he did it with full diligence, and his accomplishment was absolutely no less than anything else he could have done. On the contrary, he actually affected the whole world. This principle translates to us because, as I said before, we sit in yeshiva and we learn and we daven, and occasionally the Yetzer Hara comes and gives us a little tickle. Says, what are you accomplishing? If you were a carpenter, you would accomplish more than sitting and learning. You would build and making furniture. There's something to show for it. So, if our lives consisted in observation, in showing off, in showing what I'm able to do, then in fact a carpenter would show more than sitting and learning Torah. He would have much more to display what he accomplished over the year. But since that our lives are not observers, we are not strangers. This is our world. This is our world that we were given to build and to affect. Therefore, the simple things that we do even though they may be superficial and less challenging intellectually or less satisfying in terms of accomplishment, but in effect, if one understands the meaning of, reflects on the meaning of living in the world, and ultimately bringing the world to its ultimate goal, as you're learning all the time, of bringing Mashiach, this has a very profound effect. It says in the Parsha that on this ladder that Yankiv saw, there are malachim going up and down. And Rashi says what they were going up and down. As a matter of fact, Rashi asks a question. Because the Pasuk says, oil in the Yordim. They were going up and coming down. Since Malachim originate up, right? The Malachim come from up. So he should have said Yordim, first coming down and then going up. Where did they come to? To going up first. So Rashi explains that what was happening there is the Malachim of Chutz La'aretz, Malachim that came with Yankiv, to Eretz Yisrael, in Eretz Yisrael till the end of Eretz Yisrael. They were going up, coming back to heaven, and now came down another set of Malachim that belonged to Chutz La'aretz. They were coming down. In other words, it means that at that time, the Malachim of Eretz Yisrael could not go out to Chutz La'aretz. There had to come a new set of Malachim. Later on, towards the end of the Parsha, which you haven't come to yet, after Yankiv was finished with Lavan, and Lavan went back home, so it says that Yankiv continued on his journey, and Vayivgu boi malachi elikim. And Malachim from Hashem came towards him. Now this was still when he was still in Chutz La'aretz, before he came to Eretz Yisrael. Malachi Elikim came towards him. So Rashi says over there that Malachim of Eretz Yisrael came now to greet him and to accompany him to Eretz Yisrael. So now the question is, if Malachim of Eretz Yisrael cannot go out to Chutz La'aretz, how did these Malachim go out? The answer is, as we said before, that Yankiv's work, the fact that Yankiv was in Chutz La'aretz, and he was able to wrestle with Lavan and transform Chutz La'aretz. So now Malachim of Eretz Yisrael were able to go to Chutz La'aretz. The Chutz La'aretz was no longer so tomei, so low, that Malachim of Eretz Yisrael cannot come there. Because Yankiv has now transformed Chutz La'aretz that it became like Eretz Yisrael. This is the famous word, Machdoch Eretz Yisrael. You heard of this word, right? The labor of learning in yeshiva is such an activity that a person, that when a Bochel learns in yeshiva, he is learning Takya, he's learning with his seichel, and he's doing mitzvahs with his hands. But in effect, he is at this time a partner with Hashem himself. He's not on his own. Because he is learning Hashem's Torah. And this Torah could not come to this world without him, without the Yid. The Yid is the one who brings the Torah down to this world. So that the the enthusiasm, so to speak, the simcha in learning is both. On the one hand, when a person learns and he understands and his mind opens up and his mind appreciates what he learns, that brings him simcha. But there is even a greater aspect that's called simcha shel mitzvah. Greater aspect in the simcha is that one recognizes and realizes that what he is doing is something very real. It's not something that has only a superficial value, but that has a value through and through. Sometimes, because we have it on a constant basis, we don't realize the effect that it has. I may have mentioned to you an experience that I had one time. I think I mentioned it here. I was putting on film with someone in the office when I was still in there working, and an Israeli fellow, a very educated, highly educated man, an Israeli, was put on film never for the first time. And he knew nothing of Yiddishkeit. And then I suggested to him, since we're in the same office, and he knows Hebrew, so maybe we'll sit down and learn something. He said, fine, we'll sit down and learn something. I had in my briefcase a Shulchan Aruch. So I took out the Shulchan Aruch and we sat and we learned. We learned maybe 5-10 minutes. And I said, this man who finished college and he was a professional and he went to Israel and all that. Israeli schools. After I learned in the few Sifrim Shulchan Aruch, we learned, I remember something about Hashkomas, how you wake up in the morning, what you're supposed to do in the morning. Something that every child learns. After we finished, the man said, and I can remember Mamash, his face and his whole expression says, wow, for the first time in my life I learned something real. That was his reaction. He knew a whole bunch of stuff, but nothing real. Nothing that defines his life. Nothing that says what his life is about and how he's supposed to live his life. And here he learned for 5-10 minutes, and he says, his eyes opened up. The first time in my life I learned something real. Tell you the truth, I myself was taken aback. I didn't expect such a reaction, because you don't realize it when you're in it. What we're learning here is what's called something real. Something that is real for the human, for a person's life in the world, and more importantly, even for a Jew's life in the world. The Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya that every possibility, you're learning Gemara, right? Every possibility that the Gemara discusses, what if this happens, what if this happens, what if this happens, what will be the law in this circumstance and these circumstances, the Alter Rebbe says that even the most far-fetched questions, that it's very difficult to imagine that this particular instant, particular case would actually happen, and a Rav would have to pass in a shayla on this question. Since that this is a question, a practical question in Torah, in other words, it has a Torah ingredients, what should you do according to Torah law? Therefore, this is part of Hashem's will and Hashem's seichel. That when we learn a piece of Gemara, whether or not we can personally relate to it, whether or not we can imagine it happening, it is very real in terms of Hashem's seichel. And when we learn Hashem's will, Hashem's seichel, we are, as a result of that, bringing Hashem's light and bringing the Torah into the world. And thus we are participants in the creation of the world. This is the meaning of something real. Not real means you're sitting there and you're observing the world going by. It may be a nice color, it looks nice, and you're enjoying seeing it, but you're just observing it. Real is when you are participating. Real is when you recognize what the world is about. And you relate to it, and you do what is your requirement to participate in that, like putting on tefillin, keeping Shabbos, eating kosher, doing all kinds of whatever other mitzvahs that everyone has an opportunity to do. This is the real participation in the creation of the world. This is when we become real. And this is why Yankiv was able to withstand 20 years in Laban's house, tending to his sheep. And as a result of that, he built the Jewish people right there in Laban's house. You all know that he got married in Laban's house, and most of his sons, 11 of the 12, were all born in Laban's house. And he built this eternal nation right there in Chora. That will, the nation that will carry the world to its ultimate purpose, its ultimate accomplishment. So, we all here are coming out of Chora now. We're all coming out of the Golus slowly. And each one is a true participant in the Meibash's plan, in the Breishis, the Beis Reishis, B'shvil HaTeiro, B'shvil Yisrael. This is the real strength of a Yidden. This is the real life. The Meibash will grant you lots of success, both in learning and in doing mitzvahs, and in recognizing the great joy, with great joy, what life is about, what your life is about, and what you have to do in this world. You should have much success. And remember, the ladder is standing on the very bottom. But that ladder that's rooted on the very bottom goes all the way up to the heavens. And it brings down the malachim from above, the malachim from below, and it transforms the whole world. Should all be matzliach. Have the Celestines.
Right.